Across Florida right now, more homeowners are quietly falling behind on their mortgage than at any point in years, and almost no one is saying it out loud. The headlines keep telling you the market is fine, that prices are holding, that Florida is still the place everyone dreams about. But here is what they are not telling you. In 10 specific Florida towns, the share of people who simply stopped paying their mortgage has been climbing in a way that does not match the cheerful story being sold to you. This is not some future prediction. This is happening right now on real streets to real people who bought near the top and are now staring at a bill they cannot cover. And the reason behind it is not the reason you have been handed. It is not laziness, it is not some sudden wave of job losses, and in most of these towns, it is not even the price of the house itself. There is one question every Florida homeowner is quietly asking right now, which is whether their own town is on this list. And some of these towns are going to surprise you because they are not the rundown corners you might expect. Several are the exact places people were fighting to move into just a couple of years ago, the towns that filled every relocation list and every retirement guide. That is what makes this so unsettling. The trouble did not arrive in the forgotten corners of the state. It arrived in the places everyone was told were safe. So stay with me, because by the time we reach the very top, you are going to understand the real reason, and you need to watch this all the way through. Let us start at number 10 in Cape Coral on the southwest coast. On paper, Cape Coral still looks like a success story. Zillow shows a town that grew at a pace almost no other place in the country could match during the boom years, and the canals and the new construction made it look unstoppable. But underneath that picture, something quietly broke. The reason people here are falling behind has very little to do with their paycheck and almost everything to do with what it now costs to simply keep the home insured and protected from water. Many homeowners who bought during the rush locked in a monthly mortgage they could afford, only to watch their insurance and flood coverage climb year after year until the real monthly cost was hundreds of dollars higher than the loan they signed for. And there is a second, quieter pressure here that local owners know all too well: the rising cost and the constant uncertainty around the water and the canals that made this town famous in the first place, which only adds to the monthly burden of staying put. Redfin data shows listings piling up here faster than buyers are arriving, which means anyone who needs to sell their way out of trouble is now competing against a wall of other sellers all reaching for the same exit. So the homeowner is trapped. They cannot afford the carrying cost, and they cannot sell fast enough to escape it. That is the real reason. In Cape Coral, the loan was never the problem. The cost of keeping the water out was. Number 9 is Port Charlotte, just up the coast, and the story here is even more direct. This is a town that has been hit by storms again and again, and every single time the insurance market answered with higher premiums and a wave of non-renewals. Picture a retiree who paid off most of their home, or who carries a small, manageable mortgage. For years, the math worked. Then the renewal letter arrived, and the premium that used to be one number was suddenly nearly double. For someone on a fixed income, that is not an inconvenience. That is the difference between making the payment and not making it. The mechanism here is brutal in its simplicity. When the property itself becomes too expensive to protect, people start choosing between the insurance and the mortgage, and eventually some of them lose the ability to pay either one. Zillow still lists Port Charlotte as an affordable place to buy, and on the price of the house, that is true. But affordability is not the price tag on the door. Affordability is everything you have to pay every month after you walk through it. And in Port Charlotte, that hidden monthly number is what is pulling people under. What makes it worse is that there is almost nothing the homeowner can do about it. They cannot shop their way to a cheaper policy when half the carriers have stopped writing in their zip code entirely. They cannot move the house out of the storm path. They are stuck with a cost that arrives like clockwork and grows like a weed, and the only lever left to pull is the mortgage payment itself. Number 8 takes us across the state to Palm Bay on the East Coast, and here the villain changes shape. Palm Bay saw one of the sharpest price run-ups of the entire boom, as buyers priced out of the bigger coastal cities rushed inland looking for something they could still afford. The trouble is that many of them bought at the very peak, with interest rates that pushed their monthly payment to the absolute edge of what they could handle. They stretched. They told themselves the raise was coming, that the side income would hold, that they would refinance later when rates came down. None of that arrived the way they hoped. So now you have households where the mortgage eats so much of the monthly income that a single surprise, a car repair, a medical bill, a cut in hours is enough to miss a payment. Redfin shows asking prices in Palm Bay drifting lower as sellers test the water, which means the equity these buyers were counting on as a safety net has thinned out. The real reason here is the stretch itself. These were not reckless people. They were optimistic people who bought at the worst possible moment, and the gap between what they earn and what they owe each month never closed. And because they have so little equity to fall back on, there is no quiet escape hatch. They cannot pull money out of the home to cover a rough stretch because there is no money in it yet. So when the strain hits, it hits the mortgage directly, and the fall happens faster than anyone watching from the outside would ever guess. Number 7, Kissimmee, in the tourist corridor near Orlando, has a very specific kind of pain attached to it. Kissimmee became a magnet for investors who bought homes and condominiums to run as short-term rentals, betting on a steady river of vacationers to cover the mortgage. For a while, it worked beautifully, but the area filled up with so many of these rentals that the nightly income started getting split across far too many doors. At the same time, the associations that govern these communities raised their dues and handed down new fees, and the cost of cleaning, managing, and insuring a rental climbed right alongside them. So the investor who counted on the property paying for itself is now covering the shortfall out of pocket every single month, and the policy that protects the place keeps getting more expensive on top of it. Many of them simply decided to stop. When the math no longer works on an investor does not cling to it out of love. They walk. And in Kissimmee, a meaningful slice of the missed payments are not families losing their only home. They are owners cutting loose a bet that quietly stopped paying off. The real reason here is saturation. There were simply too many of the same thing chasing the same shrinking pool of guests. Number 6 brings us to Spring Hill, on the Nature Coast north of Tampa. And this town tells you something important about who is most exposed in Florida right now. Spring Hill has long been a haven for retirees and working families who came here precisely because it was supposed to be the affordable choice. But the two costs that hit this town hardest are the two costs nobody can negotiate down: property taxes and insurance. As values rose, assessments followed, and the yearly tax bill climbed for people whose income did not move at all. Layer the insurance increases on top of that, and you have households where the actual cost of staying in a fully owned or nearly owned home keeps marching upward every year with no ceiling in sight. Zillow paints Spring Hill as a place where you can still find a reasonably priced house, and you can. But the danger was never the purchase price. The danger is the slow, relentless rise of everything wrapped around it. The real reason people fall behind here is that the fixed income met an unfixed cost, and the unfixed cost won. And the cruelty of it is that these are often the people who did everything right. They paid their home down for decades. They lived within their means. They were promised that ownership would protect them in their later years. Instead, the very thing they were supposed to own free and clear keeps sending them a larger bill every single year, and there is no salary increase coming to meet it. Number 5 is Lehigh Acres, back over near the southwest coast, and this is where the word equity starts to matter. Lehigh Acres has always been one of the most investor-heavy markets in the state, a place where homes traded hands quickly during every upswing. The problem is, what happens when the music slows? A large number of people who bought here in the last few years now owe more on the loan than the home would fetch if they listed it today. Redfin shows prices in this area softening while the supply of homes for sale stays stubbornly high, and that combination is poison for anyone who needs to get out. When a homeowner owes more than the property is worth and also cannot afford the rising monthly carrying cost, they reach a cold and rational conclusion. There is no reason to keep pouring money into something they can never sell for what they owe, so they stop. The real reason in Lehigh Acres is negative equity meeting rising costs, and once those two forces line up, walking away stops feeling like failure and starts feeling like arithmetic. And the more people who reach that same conclusion at the same time, the more homes hit the market at once, which pushes prices down even further and pulls the next group of owners into the very same trap. It feeds on itself. Each person who decides to stop makes it a little harder for the person next door to keep going. Number 4 is Deltona, in the central part of the state between Orlando and Daytona, and this town is the clearest example of payment shock you will find anywhere. Deltona attracted a wave of buyers during the boom who put very little money down, often using programs designed to get people into homes with the smallest possible upfront cost. That sounds generous until the market shifts. With almost no cushion of equity, these owners had no protection when insurance jumped and when their other monthly costs crept up. They were living right at the line from the day they got the keys. Zillow listed Deltona as an entry point into the Florida dream for thousands of families, and for a while, it was. But an entry point with no margin is a trap waiting for the first bad month. When the insurance renewal landed and the monthly number jumped, there was no savings to absorb it and no equity to borrow against. And once a household misses one payment, the late fees and the pressure stack up so quickly that catching back up becomes almost impossible, which is how one bad month quietly turns into a pattern. The real reason here is that people were placed into homes with no room to breathe, and the moment costs rose, the breathing stopped. If you have followed the thread this far, you are already paying closer attention than most people who skim the headlines and move on. Whether you already own a home somewhere in Florida or you are quietly planning the move, the next several towns are the part you really need to hear, because this is where the pattern stops being about price and starts being about something almost nobody is warning you about. Number 3 is Northport, one of the fastest building towns on the southwest coast, and the villain here wears a hard hat. Northport has been filled with brand new construction, and the builders putting up those homes have a powerful tool that ordinary sellers do not. They can offer incentives, they can buy down the interest rate, and they can quietly cut the price on a new home to keep the inventory moving. What that does to the person who bought a Northport home 2 or 3 years ago is devastating. Redfin and Zillow both show that the resale homeowner is now competing against shiny new houses next door that come with sweeteners they simply cannot match. So their home will not sell for what they owe, and the value on paper keeps slipping as the builder keeps discounting. Add the same insurance pressure squeezing the rest of the state, and you have owners who are stuck and slowly going backward. The real reason in Northport is that the builders set the price, and the everyday homeowner cannot compete with a company that can afford to undercut them all day long. And the buyer who purchased near the peak is left holding a home that the market now quietly values below what they paid for it through no fault of their own. They did not overspend on a whim. They paid the going rate at the time, and then the going rate moved out from under them while the builder kept the cranes running. When the monthly costs climb on top of that, staying becomes a question they can no longer answer with a yes. Here is something worth having if you own property anywhere in Florida or you are weighing a move here. Every town worth buying into and every town worth steering clear of in this state is now gathered in one place. 40 Florida towns, 20 rated to buy and 20 rated to avoid, all in a single guide called the Florida Buy and Avoid List for 2026. Instead of stitching the picture together yourself from a dozen scattered sources, it is all consolidated for you and you can reach it through the link in the description below. But stay right here, because the real reason behind the very top of this list, the mechanism almost nobody in the headlines is talking about, is the one waiting at number 1, and it is coming up very soon. Number 2 is Homestead at the southern edge of the mainland near the Everglades, and this town is being squeezed by the very ground it sits on. Homestead carries serious flood exposure, and as flood maps are redrawn and coverage is repriced, the cost of insuring a home here has climbed into territory that many of the working families who live here never planned for. Layer on the property taxes that came with rising values, and you get a monthly cost of ownership that has quietly outrun a lot of local incomes. Zillow still shows Homestead as one of the more reachable corners of South Florida by purchase price, and that is exactly what lured so many buyers in. They saw the number on the listing, and they did the math on the loan, but almost no one did the math on the years that follow, when the coverage and the taxes only ever travel in one direction. The real reason people fall behind in Homestead is that the cost of the risk finally caught up with the cost of the home, and for many households, the two together became impossible. And that brings us to number 1, the town and the reason that almost nobody is talking about out loud. We are heading to the coast, to Hallandale Beach, and to a kind of homeowner the headlines almost never picture when they talk about people missing payments. The owner of a condominium in a tower right on the water, for years owning a condo here, meant predictable monthly dues and a manageable life by the ocean. Then everything changed. After the tragedy that shook the entire state, Florida put new rules in place requiring older buildings to undergo serious structural inspections and, for the first time, to actually fund the reserves needed for major repairs. On paper, that is exactly the right thing to do. In practice, it landed on individual owners like a hammer. Buildings that had skated by for decades suddenly faced enormous repair bills, and the only way to pay them was through what is called a special assessment. We are not talking about a few $100s. We are talking about owners being handed bills of $40,000, $50,000, even $60,000 or more, on top of monthly dues that had already doubled. Picture a retiree who owns their condo with a small mortgage, living comfortably on a fixed income, who opens an envelope and learns they owe $50,000 they do not have due soon, with no way to refinance it. For many of these owners, the mortgage is the smallest problem on the table. They cannot pay the assessment, the building will not let them ignore it, and the value of the unit itself drops as buyers run from any older tower carrying these costs. So they stop paying everything because there is simply nothing left to pay with. This is the real reason, and it is the one hiding in plain sight. And here is what makes it so dangerous. It is not contained to one town. The same pressure is building in older buildings all along the coast, in tower after tower, where the people who can least afford a surprise of this size are exactly the ones receiving it. In towns like Hallandale Beach, people are not falling behind because they bought too much house or lost a job. They are falling behind because the building itself sent them a bill the size of a second mortgage, and no amount of careful budgeting could ever absorb it. That is the story the cheerful headlines keep skipping, and it is quietly reshaping the coast one envelope at a time. So now you have seen all 10, and I want to hear from you directly. Tell me in the comments which Florida town you live in and whether you own there or you are planning to make the move. If you have been hit with an insurance renewal or an association assessment this year, tell me what the number did to you, because the real picture of this market lives in those stories far more than it lives in any headline. And tell me which town or which cost you want me to dig into next, because I read these and they shape what comes next. If you are the kind of person who believes the real story of this market is the one the headlines keep refusing to tell, hit the subscribe button right now, because next we are pulling back the curtain on the exact Florida towns where these association assessments are about to land hardest, and you are going to want to know whether yours is on that list before the letter ever reaches your mailbox.